All right. Welcome to episode, 95. You couldn't convince me this is episode 95, but episode 95 of Fanfield Motorsports. I am once again your host, Colton Cranmore. I am joined by, under his new title, the Map Man, Chad Harrington. How's it going, Chad?
It's going pretty well. Can't complain, and we are looking forward to filling in for Alex.
Yeah, Alex is feeling under the weather. He said himself, he sounds kind of like the gingerbread man off of Shrek. So if you take that and kind of pitch his voice down a little bit, that's about what Alex sounds like right now. So he's hanging out in the back. He's just watching along with us. Probably won't chime in unless we really get him riled up sitting back there. He might jump in for a quick rant if we say something too outlandish. We're going to jump right in with Splash and Dash. Chad, I don't think you've done one of these with me yet.
I have not.
All right, so we're just going to rip right on down the list, and then we'll get to talking about the NASCAR happenings this weekend. So first point I have is F1 had its third race in Australia this weekend, seeing a march through the field from Checo Perez and Alonso, showing the might of Aston Martin by being in the podium yet again.
Well, I actually saw some highlights on that, and for the way that they came through the field was kind of impressive because F1 is not known for passing, right? It's meant for speed, best car. Usually the best car wins every time. And unless some pit strategy really plays a big deal into it, you get trapped in the back of the field. But in this case, what they're what they're working on was good. The race sort of flipped upside down due to that early caution they had, and I don't understand the tire stuff, but they had 50 laps on the hard tires. Uh, Not sure, being that it was under red for a little while due to Kevin Magnussen having a parts failure, but tell me what you thought about that.
I'm gonna be honest. I haven't watched an F1 race since like Monaco last year. I kind of keep up on it. I don't really watch a ton of it though. My brother does. I never really got into it. But then the race, I guess after that last red flag, resumed and immediately went red, leading to an over 20-minute last lap after the FIA ruling made for the most bizarre ending to a race we'd ever seen.
Well, that's quite odd. I can promise you that. So, with that being said, let's go to something we definitely know, which would be IndyCar, right? And being the Texas package update, giving them 300 pounds of more downforce compared to the last few years.
Yeah, and Texas is back was the trend on Twitter as the race was the best the sport has seen in an oval since 2017, with passing happening on both ends of the weird asymmetrical track down there in Texas.
Well, Joseph Newgarden made a last green flag lap pass on Pato O'Ward, who had dominated the race up until that point, giving Newgarden an unprecedented 3 in a row at that event.
Yeah, which is, I mean, when you're talking about an oval race in IndyCar, it's more like, I don't know if it's really that comparative to like Daytona, Talladega here, but they always seem like just such, I mean, especially at Texas, I don't really want to call it a crapshoot, but just anyone can win kind of deal. At least from my perspective, that's what it seemed like the last few years. Did you watch any of the truck race this last weekend?
I did not. Unfortunately, and I sort of wish I had.
Unfortunately for me, I did. You didn't miss much. Yeah. It was pretty dry at times.
Well, I guess with no live pit stops and the longest truck race on the calendar, it made that for a little interesting, right?
Yeah, the pit stops were to be expected from not live pit stops, but um man, they had such long green flag runs that it did get kind of dry. I think that this race, especially at Texas, was way too long. I told Alex right before you hopped on that I'd have been fine seeing him a doubleheader with 125 laps apiece, and spread the 250 out over the weekend. Yeah, it was just it wasn't uneventful. Because Hocevar got shuffled back, and he ended up coming back to win it. But it was really just Nick Sanchez dominating it with not a lot going on outside of the top five. Just your typical truck stuff, super air dependent, guys running into each other nonstop.
Well, I guess that'd be a little unfortunate to do there, but as typical, NASCAR always finds a way for a green-white checker, right? Hocevar won, but what's this about him being in the wrong?
So coming as they grabbed the white, Nick Sanchez made contact with, I forget who he was running with, Zane Smith. Bumped him down. And then Hocevar, I don't think he's in the wrong at all, but all he did was not lift. And the truck kind of got squirrely in front of him, and he ended up hooking his nose right on the rear and sending him up the track, Sanchez into Chandler Smith, which I don't think he was in the wrong. I saw that as more of a racing deal of just last lap. I don't want to lift. If you get sideways in front of me, I'm probably going to plow through you kind of deal. It was an interesting ending for sure, but like you said, towards the end, I mean, such a kind of a crapshoot at the end and it's inevitably going to go to a green white checkered.
Right.
I do want to say that the Dean Thompson wreck was absolutely atrocious. I don't know if you saw the replay of that, but he was damn near stopped on the front stretch and got plowed what looked like full speed.
Yes, I saw the replay, and I'm not really sure how you can avoid some of that, even with some trucks going at a little bit reduced speed, when you can't see what's going on. At that point, it sort of would be like you would love to hear the words like a sprint car race or a dirt late model race, where as soon as somebody gets upside down, you hear race control say red, 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 and y'all slow down and stop as quickly as possible. That way you're not just keeping going, running circles around to prevent a possibility of something like that.
Yeah, and even just, I mean, maybe I didn't hear any of the spotter communication. I'm sure they said, hey, yellow's out, wrecking on the front stretch. And I don't even know how much, other than say back it down, how much you're going to get that emphasis in these guys' ear to really put on the brakes without getting run over.
That is definitely quite an interesting feat, as we see on weekly short track racing. You've got race control in everybody's ears, and some of them just fail to listen. I don't know how we can help anything to go with that and make it any better.
Yeah, and let me see here. Alex said he has bad luck. He's the one who got clobbered in the front stretch at Charlotte in 2021 when NASCAR didn't throw the yellow after he was there for almost 3 laps. Alex was at that race. So interesting to hear what he has to say about it. But yeah, definitely a scary moment, especially seeing him loaded on a stretcher. You never want to see that. On to the Xfinity race. I hear that you have had some experience with Chandler Smith.
Well, yes, we have. As being a flagman and race director at Atlanta Motor Speedway, Chandler started off racing Bandoleros at, of course, Charlotte and Atlanta. And he won our track championship quite a few times, and for Thirsty Thunder. And he is probably one of the ones just like Joey Logano. I mean, he went through that and won a record so many races in
Hmm.
his Bandolero week after week after week. It didn't matter if he started eighth. That Joker was driving through the field, making passes. I mean, he was just that good as a kid, you know. And his parents put him in late models as soon as they could. I think he was 12 when he drove his first late model race. That kid's got a wheel man mentality and he can drive, but there are times that I've seen him lose his cool and take it out on the person next to him, but he doesn't do that often.
Yeah, it was cool to see him get a win after being so close already a few times this year and really kind of having the best car a couple weeks. Um, Good to see him get it done. Um, he was on DBC this last week, and he mentioned that he isn't afraid to fight people if he feels like they need it. So
Right.
I'm interested to see how that plays out in the future.
Well, I'm pretty sure that he is a little video fella. He's probably scrappy, but if you get somebody like him and Austin Hill at it, I believe he would take tuck tail and run because Austin a big old farm boy kind of deal. Yeah, you know, you got to pick on the one that's the right size for you.
Yeah, definitely. I don't know how many guys, maybe Josh Berry could honestly take Austin Hill in a fight. I think we talked about this in a couple weeks ago, or maybe just in our group chat. Um, yeah, I've never been afraid of getting my ass kicked, but I don't think I'd want to mess with Austin Hill that much.
Yeah, you're probably right about that. But I mean, anytime you see somebody like Chandler Smith, knowing that you were on the flag stand for a lot of his wins as a kid. You know, I've even given the checkered flag to others like William Byron and Mason Massey and Jeremy Clements on dirt. You know, it's really cool to know that I have given these guys checkered flags, and you get to see them in the top tier of NASCAR later down the road. You know, that just proves that they put in their time and they did what they had to do to get there, and they most definitely earned the right to be where they are.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, I don't know if you had any other notes from the Xfinity race. To me, there was some strategy. We saw a few comers and goers, um, but honestly, it wasn't that memorable of a race. It was just another decent, good Richmond race.
Right, and the track surface is probably the slipperier surface that they race on because um, there is never a time that they're full throttle. You're probably quarter to 35% throttle the whole time, and other than that, you're going to break the cars loose and whatnot. Um, that's the real exciting part, and the ones that can, you know, you say the movers and goers, the ones that can actually take care of the tires the most are the ones that are coming back at the end of the run. You know, they might have got passed by 4 or 5, but they're going to pass those 4 or 5 and then 5 or 6 more. And it makes for good racing altogether because throttle control and the way you feel your hands, it's just a great, to me, it's a great Richmond race. Now, can't say that for the Sunday race with as many times as they shift like they're on a road course, but you know, you got that old school. Once you drop the hammer and you get it in third or fourth gear, wherever you got your gears set, you know, you're in that gear. You know, you're not changing. You've got to manage that throttle, and that's why the Xfinity cars, I think, put on such a good race there.
Yeah, and you alluded to it. Let's move to Sunday for the Cup race. Um, I do not like the shifting that we do at any track other than road courses. Um, I feel like it kind of dampens especially the short track races as of late.
Oh, by far. I got the pleasure of talking to a driver, and I will not name names, but he said that they wanted an IMSA type car. They got an IMSA type car. when you shift 5 times a lap at Phoenix and 5 times a lap, maybe 6 at somewhere like Richmond or Martinsville, it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
But you got to do it if you're going to go fast.
Right. Yeah. And the teams are kind of backed into a corner now. They don't have an option to not shift because everyone else is doing it and they're turning, burning laps off. And then not only that, but if you mess up a corner, you can just downshift and then grab a gear and go. You can't really. There's really no losing it. Losing the ass end of it and dropping 10 spots like you used to. You might just drop 2 or 3 of having to reset the gear real quick and get it to grab and go.
Yeah, well, you're not going to get the other part of that conversation was you're not going to get that car to break loose anyway as wide as those rear tires are. I mean, if you want a car to break loose, think of the difference between an open wheel modified with 8-inch rim, 8-inch wheels to a dirt late model with 12-inch wheels, right? Which one's going to stick better? And then you take a sprint car and how wide them jokers are. They're like 16 inches wide. The smaller they are, the less control you have in the corners, of course. So I think that plays a lot to do in it. I mean, there's just way too much grip for them to actually do something with. But the new package that they got with the less spoilers and some of the things removed underneath has made it better. But it's only made it probably 25% better. There's a lot more they can do.
Yeah. Yeah, and we're still dealing with a lot of dirty air issues, especially when you get, within half a car length of the guy in front of you. You have to change your line because you can't, you can't bank on driving in that dirty air and getting it to stick because you're not going to have any air to stick the front tires down. And so we're still dealing with, kind of this aero-dependent blocking.
Well, there used to be a bubble of air. Now that bubble is going through those vents and out the hood. So there's not a bubble of air to get the car loose to make a pass. I mean, go back and look at the 80s and 90s and 2000s and through the Gen 6 car, that bubble of air to where you could get somebody's tail end loose, it's gone. It's not there. All of that air is being underneath in that raised splitter port or going through those vents and out the hood.
Yeah. Yeah, which is really disappointing, especially after seeing some of the racing we have in the last 10 years, especially tracks like Martinsville and Richmond even, has still put on good races in the last few years. Not that Sunday was bad, it just wasn't great.
No, thank God it's got a good slippery surface to where they still had to work for it. That's all I can say on that.
Right. A lot of people on Twitter were arguing that this should have been a night race. For so many years, we saw both Richmond races be held at night. Do you think this one was better in the day, or do you think it would have been better suited for a Saturday night?
With the temperatures, knowing what it was during the day, I think this spring race was probably better suited for track heat and the allowance of the cars to slip a little bit with that low downforce and that basically 2-inch tall rear spoiler. Now the one in the July that they're going back to, or early August, I don't forgot which one it is, but yeah, that should probably be a night race. But even then, a night race, all that equals is grip. So you take those wide tires, put it on there and grip. I mean, somebody's either going to run away and hide from the field, or everybody's going to fall in line and run the same speed all night.
Yeah, I'm in that same boat. I don't understand the people that are in uproar saying this should be a night race. I'm with you. The heat on the track made for at least some decent slipping and sliding around, whereas with a night race, we've probably just seen follow the leader all night. And cars not being able to get enough oomph behind them to pass the guy in front with all that grip.
Now, do I think a possibility would be like the way that the 600 does? Starts in the daytime and ends under the light. So the track is going through a considerable change, and the teams have to keep up with it. And the teams that don't are the ones that fall off. that I would be more inclined to watch than just a true day race or a night race because it makes them work with the amount of limited practice they get. At some point, I know that they only got so many things they can work on pit road, but I think the ones that have the best working knowledge of these new cars and can make them work in that transition would put on a better race.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. We saw another Hendrick domination. William Byron, Kyle Larson really kind of forefronted the most of this race, with Larson ultimately getting the win. Williams spun out late in the race. We'll get to Christopher Bell and his comments here in a second. But after this win, the 5 and 24 were both taken to R&D the next race after their appeal got reversed. Do you think there's
Well,
anything nefarious going on there?
well, you gotta. I think there's one of those things. It's like, well, let's see if they're smart enough to fix it or smart enough to try it again.
Yeah.
But I thought the 5, because they tore him down, they didn't send his back. I actually read where it was the 24 and the 48 that got sent back,
Yeah,
but
I think
not
that's what it
not the
was.
9.
Yeah.
So that's still 3 of the 400 cars, right? And
Right.
yet, um, I think the 9 was really the dark horse of the day that nobody saw them even make the changes that they made, and he got better all day. Maybe it was Josh Berry getting comfortable in the car as well, but that car improved all day. He just wasn't there like Byron and Bowman and Larson.
Yeah, and he did really benefit from that late caution, to kind of leapfrog a whole bunch of spots. But Josh Berry finished second. Man, he drove a really good race. Kept it clean all day. Kept the tires under him. Didn't wear him out too much, and was able to come home second and still hold off a field from that green white checkered at the end.
Well, I will say Alex just typed in and said he's a short track genius, though. And, that's one good reason why Junior Motorsports hired him. And he's done so much on the short track world, it just fits right in his forte of how do I need to wheel a car? It doesn't matter. You give him the steering wheel on a short track, he's going to go through the front.
Yeah, especially at a place like Richmond where he can really kind of get the thing set and then roll the corner, and be easy off the throttle. Really kind of plays right into his wheelhouse. We did see a late race wreck with Christopher Bell making contact with William Byron, sending him around, and effectively ruining his day. But afterward, Christopher Bell had a comment about Ross Chastain, referring to him as a wrecking ball, and Chastain wasn't even really close to him. So I don't. Do you think it's warranted at this point for the drivers to kind of still use Ross as a scapegoat?
Well, I don't know if you can use Ross as a scapegoat, but last year was a good year to where he's the first one they think of that way, if you know what I mean.
Right.
It's really hard not to get that thought process out of your head of the way that he did drive and was very over aggressive. Now, after being called out, I do see where he's made a lot of changes on that already. And, maybe it's not warranted, but it's always that first thought. And if you're trying to drive and somebody else got into you, well, you've just gotten Ross Chastain, whether it was by Ross or somebody else. It's just an easy thing to come to and pop out your mouth.
Yeah. I don't really hold it against Bell because it's just like at work. If one guy keeps messing stuff up, you find a mistake, you're probably gonna blame him first. He did later go back on Twitter and rescind that and say, sorry, saw the replay. But it did lead us to some memes on Twitter about Ross Chastain causing all sorts of disasters. Have you seen any of these?
I've seen a couple, and I just, after the second one or third one, I was like, you got to be damn kidding me. Just like ignorance, 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 ignorance. I mean, come on, folks. Use a little bit better judgment on yourself.
Yeah. Some of them have been pretty funny. Some have not. I'm sure y'all have seen the ones that are not funny. It is what it is. The internet's still going to internet, right? Especially the kids that are my age and younger, right? We're still going to make stupid jokes and probably get flamed for them.
I mean, it's definitely a generational thing, and I know Alex just chimed in, kids, LOL. But I mean, to me, it's like you being a kid and Alex a kid because I'm such an old ass fart, you know. I mean, I saw a shirt a while ago that said, you know, I'm still a teenager. I'm just in my 40s or maybe 50s. You know, it's like, you know, whatever. But
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think even if we would have had social media like that, I don't, you know, there's just certain thresholds that my generation just wouldn't go across. Um, some people now have no filters whatsoever, and they don't understand that they don't have filters and what it can and cannot do. Um, and as you've seen some of the comedians to where they've had to retract stuff that was 14 years old or something like that when that Twitter first came out, you know, it's like, you got to be kidding me. You're going to go back and look for something 14 years ago. Culture was completely different back then. But at the same time, some of the memes that we saw, some of those go back in time that same sort of way to where, what are you thinking when you
Right.
see those? You know, it's just some of them are uncalled for, some of them are. You know, if some of them are funny, you get a chuckle, but it's, you know, one or the other. It's just how you perceive them.
Right. Yeah. And ultimately, I mean, what do they say? Opinions are like assholes. Everyone's got one. Most of them
Yeah,
seem, yeah.
and some of
Same
them's
with
got
me.
two, and some of them's got two. One, you know, some certain people's got one on their shoulders and one in their pants. I mean,
Pre-race, we saw a lot of drivers talk about aggression and green white checkers, especially after Coda last week. And more moving to Coda, drivers are calling for some single file restarts toward the end, maybe during the green white checkers, blaming a lack of respect for a lot of the late race wrecks that we have, especially the repeated attempts. And then even as far as Kevin Harvick saying that there's no punishment for driving like an ass because these cars don't wad up like they used to.
well, I mean, the cars are stable. I love the fact that they don't take and flatten tires and ruin so many people's days just by whatever, or that, you know, you can just barely get into somebody like some of these cars at one point in time. Next thing you know, you just barely touch the wall or something like that on lap 14, and you're trash from there on out. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it, I do enjoy the fact that the cars stand up for the durability and are able to put on a show, even at Daytona and Talladega, if they are on the damage policy clock. You know, it's like they still out there. They're still competing. Yeah, they can't lead the line, but be daggum if they can't push somebody, you know, it still puts on a
Yeah.
good show. The kids, I can go all the way back to Chandler Smith, and, you know, the way that the kids his age and everybody were taught completely different than the way that the generation that's about to get ready to retire from NASCAR was taught. And now there's a fine line in what you're having to teach them because of the way that they were taught. And I can honestly say that in about 8 to 10 years, we're not going to think that the way they're racing now is as bad as what's coming in. I mean,
Yeah.
you got to go back to the 70s and the way that everything was handled in the garage. Go back to the 80s, the 90s. I mean, it's completely different from every era and everything. So I don't know if you could call it a lack of respect as much as maybe our teaching and what we showed them on TV when they were a kid is the way that they are ultimately getting raced like right now. Because think of how many of these people grew up watching Jimmy Johnson, Kevin Harvick, even Joey Logano, right when he was getting started, right? And now these kids are in there mixing them up with some of these folks, and it's like they get there's no lack of respect. Well, look at what y'all did on TV, the way y'all carried yourself. Where was the respect then to where they learned it now? And that goes back to going backwards in this whole thing, and it takes on a whole nother meaning of they asked for the double file restarts, they asked for the chews, and now they reneging on themselves and saying, no, we need to be single file. We need to be put in a box. Well, you know, sometimes you have to reap what you sow and pay attention to what you ask for. You ask for it, you ask for it, you ask for it. So them jokers got it, right? And they got the choose cone. And to me, they're a product of their own success and failure. Granted, maybe after three green white checkers, yeah, let's penalize them and do them, start them single file, you know. But at that point too, if you're at fault in one of these wrecks, you put their butt in the back too. Don't not let them keep leading the race or whatever because they moved the guy out in front of them and wrecked them and caused that caution. Put them in the back of the longest line or at the end of the tail end of the single file line. Teach them a lesson at the same time. It's the only way to fix it.
Yeah, I agree. You brought up a couple good points that the kids nowadays are learning to race entirely different than 15, 20 years ago, even further back than that. When you grew up, and the win and you're in has been in place now since 2014. So we're on our 10th season of the win and you're in playoff format. So kids like Chandler Smith was 10 years old when that started, and he's essentially grown up most of his racing career and surely all of his stock car driving career with this idea coming from the top that, hey, winning is everything. So do what you got to do to win. Like you said, we're showing them that for 15, 20 years. We're replaying Dale Sr. spin and Terry at Bristol. It's really hard for them not to grasp onto that and to take it and run with it and say, this is what you got to do to win.
Yeah. But,
I mean,
look at what they always show that, but they don't show Jeff moving Rusty or Rusty moving Jeff and not spinning them out.
Right. Yep. And that doesn't raise as many views, doesn't get as many people talking,
But that's true short track racing and how you should conduct yourself. If you get it, you pay it back. You don't wreck them. You don't stuff them in the wall. That's the respect that people forget about.
Yeah. And I heard Jeff Burton say once that the kids now have not, it's not that they're learning it. In our eyes, they might be learning it wrong, but to them, that's all they've ever known, and it might be, he's even said it's way harder. He don't think he could cut it trying to come up the ranks anymore because of how tough everything has gotten. Which isn't fair to the guys like the Harvicks, like, the Kyle Bushes, the Denny Hamlins who've been here forever and gotten to know that same kind of cordialness that Mark Martin taught them and Jeff Gordon. But I mean, no one's there to teach them either. I don't see Kevin Harvick sitting these guys down every week. I don't see Denny Hamlin doing anything, but they're kind of talking to media. I don't see him taking the steps. And even at that, how much can we really do when it's a generational thing? It's kind of seems to be all over because I see it even at my local track. The younger kids are racing a lot harder and with, using the chrome horn a lot more than I saw 15 years ago, 20 years ago. Man, I had notes here because you brought up a lot of great points. I'll have to go back here. What did Alex say on us? Markability is now cursed. They never have to pay for the damages. They never see highlights of Mark letting guys go and then killing by them on the end of the run. And then Mark said, use your shit up. I got you in 25 laps. And that just goes back to the whole package deal. We don't really get to see guys save their equipment as much anymore because you can save it so much just by shifting and by the arrow.
Well, stages have proved the point of you you got to go get those 10 bonus points, or at least one for finishing 10th in the stage, right? You got to use your crap up,
Right.
and you got to
Yeah.
use it up again in stage two, and then you get this long run between stage two and the end of the race. It's it's kind of a daunting task, but nobody knows today how it used to be, to where you had to save your junk for all 200 and whatever said laps on a mile and a half, or 300 laps on a mile and a half. These kids nowadays coming up, they can go balls to the wall for stage one, stage two. Oh, let's calm it down till we make our pit stop, and then I can go balls to the walls again.
Yeah. Yeah, that definitely plays in. And you brought up the choose cone and the double file restarts. Like, we, as much as the drivers might gripe for it and some of the fans, like, we can't go backwards on that. You probably could, but you're not going to get a very good response from a lot of the drivers and a lot of the other fans, just because we, like you said, we begged for it forever. Let's double file restart. Let's get some overtime attempts. So we stop ending under caution. And now it's turned into what it is now. I think limiting the green, white checkers would, I don't even know that it would mitigate it. It would probably just have a lot of races end under caution, because guys would know this is the last attempt. Let me sail in hard.
We've actually tried the limited attempts on the green white checker, and we failed at that too. Remember? And then we actually had that dreaded blue line. As long as you made it past that, we were golden.
Mm-hmm.
No, not even that.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the only thing that will help, in my eyes, is the fact that they've got so many TV cameras, and if you were the one that hit somebody or got into them and spun them out, and yet their car's wadded up and going back on a rollback or taken up on the wrecker, if you were part of the cause of that wreck, put them in the back so that they can't do it again.
Yeah. Yeah, I absolutely agree. There should be some sort of hammer to come down. If you're involved in an incident, you get sent to the back. A, because it'll get drivers to clean their shit up a little bit and stop just sending it in and using other cars for brakes. And B, now they're out of the way. They can go hit noses and bend fenders all they want in the back and not collect anyone else.
Yep.
I always like that at short tracks. You see two late model guys or modified guys going at it and hitting each other hard. They both get sent to the back. Now I'm watching a great battle up here, and I'm watching these two numbskulls down here too.
Yep. Because they're going after each other for wrecking one another and spinning the
Mm-hmm.
other one out, and they're having their feud out there in the back. And guess what? It's still on the track. It's under green, and they're going after one another. And it's not in the pits. It's not this, that, or other anything else. They're not using it as a weapon or anything. So it's all good.
Yeah.
But some of the stuff that they are doing, it's, to me, they need to be slowed down. And he's at a rate as a race director for the quarter mile at Atlanta Motor Speedway, right? We've asked, well, why ain't y'all using replays? Well, we don't have a camera system set up there for replays. If we did, by all means, I believe we would use it to make sure that certain cars were or were not involved in that accident and put them in the back or whatnot. But we do not have one currently. Now, how many cameras does Fox and NBC
Right.
and everybody use, right?
Yeah. Yeah. How many do they bring? How many tools do they have at their disposal to implement something like that? Dozens, right? Got to be dozens.
So they could easily fix that problem and police it the right way. But I don't think the guy in the tower truly wants to be the one to make that call. And by all means, I wouldn't be the one that makes that call. But if you got video evidence, then you can say, okay, let's circle this guy, let's circle this guy, let's circle these guys. They all made contact. They were the four that was in the start of the wreck. Everybody else had damage. They're going to eliminate themselves regardless or whatever. But these four guys didn't really have that much damage. They're
Yeah.
going to the back. So say ninth place at that time becomes your leader because we just penalized them for creating that melee under a green white checker. I think it'll work.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with you completely. I think something needs to be done, but I don't necessarily think it's single file restarts. I think there are other avenues that can be taken that would lead to less uproar. Um,
Well, even Dave Moody said NASCAR's never had single file restarts unless there were no lap down cars.
right.
And that is by happenstance of the only way that NASCAR had a single file restart. But the rule was always lead lap cars to the right, lap cars to the left.
Yeah.
They've always had double file restarts. It's just that all it was set up a little different. It wasn't lead lap cars up front, lap down cars in the back. It was lead lap on the right, lap down on the left.
Yeah. Speaking of uproar, just released earlier this afternoon, we saw last week that HMS got their points penalty rescinded. So they have no points coming out. They still have the $400,000 fine across the organization. Crew chiefs are still out for 4 weeks, but the 400 points and the playoff points have been given back. Colleague Racing had their appeals today, and they are still docked 75 points for essentially the same thing, if not a lesser offense than Hendrick Motorsport had. They're still docked 75 points, still get the 10 playoff points taken out, and still have the fine, still lose crew chief, everything like that.
Well, I'm going to say this. Somebody has went through the appeals process a lot more as a team than the other. Okay? Depending on how you present your evidence is one case and one way that you can pull this off. Did they use the same exact three people last week as they
They did
did
not.
this week? So that is another possibility of change and why. Um, was there a specific reason that was a little bit different than what Hendrick Motorsports was in the report that NASCAR gave to Hendrick versus Colleague? The only reason I say this is because we know it's incredible when somebody wins an appeal. Because you have to have all of your ducks in a row. You have to have all of your evidence to prove that you were not in the wrong on this. Jeremy Clements, he said he got lucky and just had everything he needed, and it was perfect. What was the intent behind? There was no intent with Jeremy's case, right? It would just happen to be that he's a smaller team and he's used the same motor for I don't know however many times down the road. But now, what is the intent in the way that they looked at Hendrick versus Colleague?
Right.
And what were the exact modifications did they see to where it was not quite identical but similar?
Looking at it, just the base value of what we know, because obviously you and I are not sitting on the appeals committee, and we aren't inspecting the louvers when they come back from NASCAR. Hendrick had 8 louvers confiscated. Colleague had 1. Hendrick admitted to modifying the part. Colleague got permission from NASCAR to run it and still got it taken. And I think that's where a lot of the uproar is coming from, including for myself, that all 4 Hendrick cars were found to be, penalizable, in both louvers, whereas Colleague just had 1 car, 1 louver. That was admittedly wrong, not spec from the supplier. Whether that's the case with Hendrick or not, it very well may be. We heard the comments from Chad Canal saying, hey, they're coming to us kind of effed up, and we modified them so that the hood would close. And I think a lot of the uproar just comes from, why is there not more consistency, or why is there not more transparency from NASCAR to the teams, and to everyone involved?
I believe we could probably look at this Wood Brothers and Penske with the way that they did what they did on those wheels, remember?
Right.
To make them safer, to make them stay on the car. Um, um, I'm going to go to the fact that, like you said, Collie was told they could use it, right? Well, did they have that in writing saying that it was good? Did they have the NASCAR approved decal on that saying that they could run it if it needed one because it was something that was controversial and was already brought up to their attention? Um, maybe, maybe not. Who knows about that from our side and our view? But that would be like you going to your local short track. You made a phone call, and the track owner said, "Yeah, you can run that right rear tire. We don't use them here, but it's your first time." And in the rule book, it says you can get away with pretty much anything in your first trip to the racetrack. But then everybody protests you because you had a harder tire, right? And then they throw you out after the track owner said you could run it. So, what person did they say said that
Right.
they could run it?
Right. Um, and then, like you mentioned, the appeals team was different, so we're not getting the same guys. Bill Lester wasn't looking at both these; he just looked at the Hendrick one. The guys on this just looked at the Colleague one, so it opens the door for politicking. Guys presenting their case a little bit better. And that's kind of what you mentioned is, do you have all your stuff lined up, all your ducks in a row to be able to actually defend this? And maybe Colleague didn't, like you said, they have not been through the appeals process near as many times as Hendrick has. So there is some experience that plays into there. But I think we're seeing a lot of the fan reaction feed off of people in the industry, like the other crew chiefs, who are getting upset that there isn't the transparency of finding out, okay, well, they did this and they didn't do this, whereas Colleague did this and not this. I think if NASCAR would release just a little bit, at least to the teams and the team owners, to say, here's what it was, here's why that decision was reached. Because I feel like a lot of the uproar on Twitter is being fueled by the crew members.
You're probably right about that. And you got to remember, all of these appeals back in the 80s and 90s, they were never reported on. Remember when
Right.
we got to the 2000s, the media, the teams, they all wanted a little more transparency so that they would publish a little bit about it. But they still don't publish the whole story. NASCAR
Right.
doesn't release a true report saying, okay, here is points A through whatever, and list them out like a document with 5 bullet points under each one of each one of your letters. And the average fan, would they understand the language that they may use in parts of that? Other racing people probably would, but just your average fan may or may not be able to understand the verbiage used in some of the ways that they do it. I mean, we've all seen the section so such and such paragraph 4 lines item 2.3b underwritten by C12, as
Right.
it's as the rules infractions say. But where does that? I mean, just say page 28 on the rule book under this, that, and the other. This is what it states. But there's so many things in the way that it. I just don't. I just don't think that enough people would understand if they released one of their reports based on the way that they put their verbiage in text form for rule books to understand what it actually means. Um, so it could be a lost cause on all of our cases, and sometimes, okay, maybe we just have to go back to it being behind closed doors and just said, okay, this is how it is. this team is, we reduced the fine based on this, and this, or we upheld it because of this and this, because of the way it was done, like so. If it would be so simple, it would be very much more relatable and understandable to all fans, all racing minded people, all racing uh, industry people as well, I believe.
Yeah. Yeah, and Alex brings up a good point that I thought of there. Like, the rule book isn't public, so like you said, the verbiage and everything, most people probably aren't going to understand it as it's written, nor are they going to understand it from kind of the legal jargon that they're going to be putting this appeal into to release anything written. But also, the rule book isn't public. Every rule that we know of in the current form of NASCAR is all based off of hearsay, or it's Bob Pocker's reporting. We can't go look up the rule book to see exactly what Hendrick did or Colleague didn't. So, I mean, ultimately, it's still going to be up to speculation, and us, armchair racers are still gonna say what we think, right, regardless of whether we were right or not.
Yes, and which also proves a good point. Um, we can sit here and debate just like what we had for the last 15 plus minutes, right? Guess what? NASCAR is still on our mind. We are still completely talking about it. We're talking about it past the event, and we're still going on about this points penalty, right?
Yep.
From weeks ago. Not that happened Sunday, but weeks ago. But yet, the race that was just ho hum on Sunday, and here we've got another couple of days worth of good NASCAR, this, that, and the other, and they stay so relevant due to that. The fan base is that way. It's just like the NFL and the injury reports, and it's like, oh no, somebody strained a big toe on practicing Wednesday, jogging down through there with his helmet and his shorts. He may or may not be eligible to play on Sunday.
Yep. Yeah, same thing. Any publicity is good publicity, especially when you're talking about something as massive as NASCAR. Get people talking. It's still going to be good for the sport. I'm going to wrap it up here. Chad, do you have any last notes? You have a new company. I don't know if you've talked about yet. I don't know if you want to yet.
Well, no, I mean, I can. It is Matt Man Designs, and it is formerly doing exactly what I've been doing for the last 5 or 6 years. I've had a lot of the racing community reach out, and they asked if I was still making mats, and I found a way to provide them with the mats still. So, back when Tanner English introduced you to Chad, the Mat Man, in his phone. So that's where the Mat Man Designs came in from. And, we still do a lot more in the dirt world than anywhere else, but we have made some big grounds. I would like to say Joey Gase was one of my first 3 customers this year. So we have mats in the Emerald Gase Motorsports in the Xfinity Series, and Jordan Anderson followed me through this venture, and he's been getting mats from me the past 4 years as well. And the cool part is, Alsco sponsors one of his thing, and he told him he had a mat man, so he did not get the mats from Alsco. He had a mat man, so that was sweet.
Yeah, hell yeah.
And being that most of these guys race on dirt, that's the reason we got it all started, right? So we can segue into the fact that some of our local dirt heroes are going to be mixing it up with NASCAR and trucks and Cup on Sunday. And I'm going to just say the $1 Million Superman will be one of the prime examples, driving a Spire Motorsports truck and a Colleague Racing third entry on Sunday. And as humble as it sounds, he's actually raced Legends cars at the Thunder Ring down at the Atlanta Motor Speedway. He's raced at Sonora, all over North Georgia, and he was a Georgia guy for the longest time, and then he was regional, and then he just stepped on it and became a big time dirt late model racer, and got a couple of Lucas Oil Dirt Late Model Championships under his belt, and World 100 wins and everything else. So I think any dirt guy has a real good shot at making and pulling off a win. It may be the wheelman himself, Mr. Jonathan Davenport.
Yeah, he was probably the most. He's gonna the most excited that I'm, or the tang tungled up. He is the one that I'm really excited about running this weekend, just because he does have so much experience and he is so skilled behind the wheel of a dirt car. We've seen the dirt ringers do good in the past. We've seen the dirt ringers kind of just hang out before. I think he's going to be one to really kind of ruffle some feathers. I look, depending on weather, the weather is not looking good for this weekend in Bristol. But if we get these heat races in, he could very easily steal at very least a heat race, and, bring some big knuckles to the fight come the main event.
He can. And here's you another one. You said you wouldn't get in a fight with Austin Hill.
Yeah, I ain't touching Jonathan Davenport either.
Jonathan's a pretty big old guy as well, but Norm Benning is not one I would like to not make unhappy on the truck side. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But, I will say that they are probably one of the ones that are husband and wife that will be overlooked on dirt, and that's Stuart and Jessica Friesen. And I believe that given the right shot, the right opportunity, and the right luck fall either one of those guys and gals' way, you could have a pretty good major dirt win by a dirt driver. I mean, she's a definitely good girl on dirt when it comes to handling those big block modifieds now.
Yeah. Tyler Carpenter is another one that's going to be in there. Yeah. He's good, kind of.
Well,
yeah.
That and him and Hudson going at it in the dome this past year. He just.
Yeah. He really. I was excited seeing him win the dome in 2019. It kind of had an underdog feel to it. But man, I really do not like that guy anymore, to put it lightly.
Some people just rub your nose the wrong way. You know what I mean?
There's a reason that he's only relevant a week of the year. I'll say that.
The one thing that I'm looking forward to is actually tomorrow, because Kyle Busch is going to be driving one of my buddy Brandon Overton's dirt late models at Volunteer for the Kyle Larson promoted Flow Racing event.
Yeah, I did forget that was going on this week. That'll be super cool, especially for Kyle Busch, who's been doing a lot more dirt stuff recently.
Yep. And then Chase Briscoe's supposed to race in that, and he's also going to bring the dirt late model to Talladega Short Track, Talladega weekend, when they're going to have I believe it's two 20-lap features, 4,000 to win on Friday night, and then they're going to have a 50,000 to win World of Outlaw feature on Saturday night before the Cup race at Talladega on Sunday. So that's one that I'm hoping to get to one way or another. But getting to see all these guys that in one way, form, or fashion have the mats in their racing rigs are always a good thing. So, and knowing that we started it for the dirt guys, it's definitely one of those fun deals to go to races and see nowadays.
Yeah, and I'm kind of jealous, y'all. I was lucky enough to see you race at the Talladega Short Track when I was there in 2019. Super cool facility. Awesome to even be able to see it, especially see guys like Red Farmer race down there. Just an awesome experience. If you've never been to it and you're listening, if you are within a couple 100 miles of it, be sure to at least check out the Talladega Short Track at some point in the coming future. Check it out this spring if you can. but that is a must see for, I think, just about all racing fans out there.
Yeah. Well, I've had a good time tonight, Colton.
Yeah,
and we kept right at an hour too, so Alex will be real happy.
Kept it brief. He won't have as much editing to do, and hopefully I didn't cuss too much. I've been trying to be a little bit better about that. Other than that, I just want to say thank you, Chad, for coming on to fill in a little bit.
Thanks.
Yeah, man, that was good. I'm for those of you watching, I've kind of peeled back a little bit. At least now for the time being, to an every other week show. I just need to catch up on a lot of stuff at home, especially with my eBay store. I got garage sale season's coming up, so I really got to kind of put my nose to the grindstone here. So you'll be seeing me intermittently. Keith has been doing really good about filling in the weeks that I am not here. But fun as always to hop on and talk NASCAR. Be sure to check us out on all social media platforms. That is YouTube, Twitch, Twitter, Facebook at FanFuel MSM, capital F, capital F, capital MSM, Instagram as well. Nate has been doing a really good job about that. Check it out Easter Sunday. Bristol Dirt's going to be on. I know I'm going to be watching, even if I got to flip it on at Grandma's house during Easter dinner.
That says a lot right there.
She'll get over it. All that being said, thank you guys for watching. This was episode 95. Wow. Take it easy. We'll see you, Chad.
See you.